Hello everyone, I'm Alex Dykes, and today on thetruthaboutcars.com we are taking a look at the 2015 Mustang GT. Now the 2015 Mustang has been completely redesigned for this model year, and we get a lot of changes that are designed for the world market, because this Mustang does have the intention of being sold worldwide, and that wasn't necessarily the case in the past. We're told by Ford that we should also see a factory right-hand drive version of the Mustang at some point here soon. Now, in order to make this particular Mustang palatable in, say, countries like Europe, we now have a 4-cylinder engine that's turbocharged under the hood in certain models, and we have an independent rear suspension. To me, the front end of this Mustang looks sort of like a combination of the previous generation Mustang, an Aston Martin, and a current generation Ford Fusion. I think that overall this is definitely a good look for this car. It looks an awful lot less cartoonish than the current generation Chevy Camaro. For 2015, all models in the US do get standard HID headlamps, and most models look very similar up front. The Mustang GT does get these little vertical bars right here in the grille, and we also have hood vents on the hood. Now don't worry about America's favorite muscle car getting too short, because this is only a hair shorter than the last generation Mustang. And the current generation Chevy Camaro may be a little bit longer, but the next generation will actually shrink as well, and it's only going to be about 1/4 of an inch longer than the one we're taking a look at here. If you're wondering about reference points, this is nearly a foot shorter than a Dodge Challenger, because the Dodge Challenger is based on a very, very large vehicle, and it's about a foot longer than a BMW 2 Series. The rear end styling is undeniably Mustang. We get a large GT logo right here. In case you're wondering, there is a button for a trunk release right above the license plate. Large central backup light right there, and we get these sequential LED turn signals that we've been seeing out of Ford Concepts for a little bit here. Under the hood, there's a big change for 2015, and that's the availability of a 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. Now, the 4-cylinder turbo is the most efficient engine available in the Mustang, but it's not the least powerful in an interesting twist. Things start out with a 3.7-liter V6, good for 300 horsepower, and then you option up the 2.3-liter turbo. That will give you 10 more horsepower and 40 more pound-feet of torque, along with the more advantageous torque curve. Of course, we're in the Mustang GT, so we have a 435 horsepower 5-liter V8 engine, and if you want more power than that, next year we'll be bringing us a GT 350, good for 526 horsepower. The transmissions on offer are a 6-speed manual or a 6-speed automatic transmission, sending power, of course, to the rear wheels. That's a few speeds behind the competition. Most notably, the Challenger and the 2016 Camaro will be using 8-speed automatic transmissions. You'll also find an 8-speed transmission in the Hyundai and a 7-speed in the Nissan. You can think of the Mustang's interior styling as sort of modern retro. We get a relatively thin rim steering wheel compared to some of the sports cars out there. We don't have very strong sport grips, but we do have an attractive circular airbag, and we also have controls here for the radar adaptive cruise control. That's a very interesting twist, because we also have the 6-speed manual, and the two are not mutually exclusive. Interior parts quality and fit and finish have certainly improved in this generation of the Mustang, and I would rank this above the Camaro, the Z, and the Hyundai Genesis. On the inside, we don't get Ford's brand new Sync 3 system. Instead, we still get the old My Ford Touch system. However, we should expect to see Sync 3 at some point in this generation of the Mustang, perhaps next year. When it comes to seats, you should know a few things about the Recaro seats that our particular model has. They are about $1,600 extra, and in order to get them, you do give up an awful lot over the base seats that we get in the Mustang GT. So in this particular car, if this option box had not been checked, the front seats would be heated, they'd be ventilated, they'd have power adjustable lumbar support, power adjustability period, and they would be memory linked, and none of those features happen in the Recaro seat. As with most two-door coupes, especially coupes in this particular segment, the rear seats are quite compact, and there are only 2 seat belts back there. If you want a two-door coupe that seats 5, the Dodge Challenger is your only choice at the moment. I've always been a fan of the Mustang out on the road, a little bit more of a Dodge Challenger kind of person, because I prefer that larger, heavier ride, but the Mustang has always been the more fun option in this segment. The last generation, or I should say current generation, Chevy Camaro does not feel quite as sorted as the Mustang out on the road. It actually didn't feel quite as sorted as the last generation Mustang, even though that used a solid rear axle. In terms of acceleration, we ran from 0 to 60 in 4.5 seconds in this Mustang GT. Remember that your 0 to 60 time will vary a great deal depending on not only the engine you choose, but also the rear axle ratio. And this particular one does have the lowest rear axle ratio available. The GT's 5-liter V8 sounds incredible, especially when you wind this puppy up all the way to its 7,000 RPM redline, which is awfully high. Now, if you want something even higher, the new Mustang GT 350 will rev to 8,000 RPM, we're told. Out on this road, the last generation of the Mustang just felt unsettled. It was all due to that solid rear axle. The solid rear axle also meant it sometimes had difficulties applying all that power to the pavement, depending on the pavement surface. This generation of the Mustang, however, feels entirely different. It feels much more nimble out on the road. We get a suspension that doesn't get upset over these rough pavement areas in the corners right here, and overall it's just an awful lot more connected to the driver. Now on the downside, the steering in the Mustang is just as isolated as most vehicles on the market right now because we do get electric power steering. Now we can adjust the steering effort in the Mustang, but we cannot adjust the steering feel, so we're never going to get more feedback from those front tires. A wise man once told me you should never confuse steering heaviness or steering weight for steering feel. It's definitely going on in this Mustang. This generation of the Mustang also gives us a quieter cabin, and if you get that 2.3-liter EcoBoost engine, we also get improved fuel economy. Although I have to say, for a 5-liter V8 engine that produces this much power, I've been averaging 18 to 19 miles per gallon, which is pretty good. I think the most interesting comparison for the Mustang really is the BMW 2 Series Coupe, especially the BMW M235i versus this Mustang right here. Now the M235i is relatively reasonable for a BMW. Performance is actually quite similar to this model that we're testing here. We get a little bit more steering feel coming out of the steering rack. We also get the option of all-wheel drive, which will improve all-weather performance. You can get an 8-speed automatic or a 6-speed manual in that 2 Series, and I think that the 8-speed automatic is a very nice combination as far as performance goes, but I think the BMW 6-speed manual is a little bit more engaging than the Ford's. The BMW feels a little bit more nimble out on the road, but you don't get the same kind of great sound out of that 3-liter turbocharged engine that we do get out of this 5-liter V8. For 2015, Ford has priced the Mustang very aggressively. I might actually say surprisingly aggressively, because this undercuts the Hyundai and the Nissan, even though those two models have been around for some time. $23,800 buys you the base V6. If you want the 2.3, that's $25,300, and the GT starts at $32,300. The comparative takeaway here is that for the base price of the Hyundai Genesis Coupe, you can get the 2.3-liter EcoBoost engine, and for just about $2,000 more than a 370Z base, you can actually get a Mustang GT. If you're interested in the ragtop version of the Mustang, you should know that the trim levels are actually different than the regular coupe, and therefore it's not as big of a price jump as it looks on paper. The base V6 version of the convertible will set you back $29,300, just a little bit less than a Mustang GT coupe, but you get a lot more content in it. Comparisons for the Mustang are a tiny bit tricky right now because the 2016 Camaro has been announced. Some people have driven it, but we have not driven it at thetruthaboutcars.com, and it doesn't have a price tag yet. However, most estimates put it a few $1,000s higher than the Mustang GT. Chevy is dealing with their engine lineup slightly differently. A 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged engine will be the base engine in the Camaro, but it will be less powerful than the V6 we get base in this model, and definitely less powerful than the 2.3-liter EcoBoost. On the flip side, the V6 engine produces more power than the V6 or the 2.3-liter EcoBoost engine that we get over here, and their V8 engine is more powerful than the GT as well. Of course, 2016 is also bringing the Ford GT 350, which will have over 500 horsepower under the hood. Versus the 2015 Camaro, which I think is the more appropriate comparison at this time because we don't have pricing information, the Mustang is a lot more nimble, it's also more efficient. The handling is definitely more sorted in this Mustang. That shouldn't surprise you because the last generation of the Mustang, even with a solid rear axle, actually felt better on broken pavement than the current generation Chevy Camaro. There really isn't an easy way to compare this to the Dodge Challenger because the Dodge Challenger is much larger. You can actually think of the parallel to BMW's line of vehicles in that respect. This is more like a BMW 3 Series sized vehicle or 4 Series sized vehicle, and the Dodge Challenger is more of a 6 Series sized vehicle. In a similar line of comparisons, the 2016 Camaro is actually going to be very closely related to the Cadillac ATS Coupe, which is a BMW 3 Series, 4 Series direct competitor. I do expect the Camaro to handle very well and feel very good out on the road because the ATS handles and feels incredible on the road as well. The Hyundai Genesis Coupe and the Nissan 370Z are feeling a little bit old these days, both on the outside and on the inside. Hyundai has tried to freshen the Genesis very slightly by removing the turbocharged 4-cylinder engine and giving the V6 an 8-speed automatic transmission. However, the most fun to be had in the Mustang is, of course, with the manual transmission, not the automatic, so there's not a huge amount of difference there. If you're after the most comfortable ride in this segment, that would obviously be the Dodge Challenger, but at this moment especially, the the Mustang is definitely the best handling, fastest, and best feeling vehicle in this segment. Kind of an interesting sideways comparison would be the BMW M235i. It actually reminds me an awful lot of the Mustang. They handle and feel relatively similar to one another. The BMW is a little bit more connected. They're both kind of isolated out on the road. Performance is quite similar, even though they're relatively similar in weight, and that's all thanks to the turbochargers we get in that BMW. Now, the rear-wheel drive Mustang GT is still about half a second faster than the M235i in our testing, but if you get the 8-speed automatic and all-wheel drive in that BMW, it actually drops your 0 to 60 time to 4.4 seconds, which is about 1/10 faster than the GT we're testing here. Of course, the BMW will cost you more than the Mustang GT initially. It will also likely cost you more to insure and more to maintain than the Ford. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Be sure and click that subscribe button at the bottom of your screen. Check out all of our related videos on our channel as well, and I'll see you next week.